Hi, everybody. I should be live now, and I can see we've already got some people in the chat. This is the first time I've done a live stream, so might take a little bit to work out the technical details. If you can hear me, can you put something in the chat? Just say I hear you or something like that, just so I know it's working okay. Hi. All right, and it looks like we've got some people hopping on. Excellent. Glad you can hear me. It seems like there's a little lag in the chat, so I'm going to try to keep my eye on that and manage a bunch of different screens at once. So I just downloaded some stream software this morning. Hopefully that'll make things go okay, but we'll figure it out if not. So we'll go ahead and talk about a few things, and then we'll get into the Excel dashboard. I don't want to spend a lot of time just leading up to it because I want to get into that. But I think that there's some really interesting things happening around data science, data analytics when it comes to coronavirus, especially. I don't know if everyone's been seeing, but obviously there's a lot of data. There was a call to action to the tech community on machine readable COVID 19 data sets this week. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I'll go ahead and share my screen here with that. Essentially 29,000 different articles, 13,000 of them with full text. So it's interesting to me how 10 years ago, when we had things like the avian flu hitting everywhere, I didn't remember seeing this as any sort of focus, not as something that could be a way to help manage and mitigate and minimize the influence. And now we're seeing that there's this big call to data scientists, to programmers, to analysts, saying, what can you do to help us? What can you find that maybe we haven't already found that will streamline it? So there's a bunch of data out there on it. Today, we're just going to talk about a really small part of it. I got quite a few questions, both in the comments of the last video and then over email about the dashboard that I put together and specifically how I prepped the data for it. So I thought about making a video, and then I thought, wouldn't it be kind of cool if I just went live and we could walk through it and you can either just watch, or I'm going to do this real time starting from scratch so you can follow along. I'll put all of the links in there. I'll link the data set in here just a moment and we can get going. So the data set is from Johns Hopkins University, and I'll drop this in the chat. Let's see, let's see if I can drop it in here. I have to switch screens. Okay, so you can go to this website and you can get the data. So let's look at that, what that includes. We've got here the Johns Hopkins University, their System Science and Engineering group has partly been responsible for gathering this data. They have their own interactive dashboard on this site. So if you go to that page, you can find it. We're going to talk a little bit about the data that's available there. So you can see their numbers. When we get through this, you'll notice our numbers are a little different. They have their data and resources listed, but they must be live updating some other way, because I've noticed anytime I've looked at it, my numbers are always a little bit lower than their numbers, which hopefully they are live updating. Maybe it's news reports or some other source that's not updating in that daily update they're doing, because we know that it's changing rapidly, especially when we look at the US. We can look at any country in this data set, but I'm from the US. I know a lot of the viewers, I don't know where you all are from, but the US is a big focus in terms of growth. It's personally on my mind. So down lower, we've got 6 different files. We're going to be using 3 of these files. The original was a wide form, so they put a new column for each day. We're going to do this wide to narrow form, so they've consolidated it a little. It'll be a lot easier to use in Tableau. So go ahead and download these bottom 3 files: the time series, NCOV confirmed, deaths, and recovered. And we'll want to pull those together. So yeah, tell me where you're from. I see some people putting in the chat. We've got someone from Dublin, Texas. That's awesome. So if you want to do this on your own country, I'm going to walk through some things that are actually going to make this a little more complicated for the US because of how the initial reporting was done. But if you want to report on your own country and region, it's even within that. That's in this data. This isn't just from the US. So hopefully you're starting to get these files downloaded. I have them already downloaded, but I haven't done anything to them yet. So let me go ahead and I'm just going to pull up the recovered file. Actually, let me start out with the confirmed because we know that's where most of the numbers are. There just hasn't been a lot of testing, and I think that's drastically affecting our numbers. And this might even be explaining why we have such a severe looking case in Washington, because they've done a lot more testing than most other states through the Seattle flu study, where they've been doing work to test what types of flu strains are most prominent. And they actually ended up have been testing a fair amount for coronavirus. So their testing numbers are higher, which is likely also contributing to their total cases being higher as well. Yes, I am going to upload this as a video after the live stream, so you can go back and watch it and work along with it if you want. All right, so we've got this spreadsheet up here with our confirmed cases. I'm just going to go ahead and expand my columns so I can see them easier. And I'm going to go through and put a filter on this. It's going to take a few minutes for me to show you exactly what I did. I want to walk through the process though, because I think the step-by-step is helpful for you, but knowing my thought process is going to help you better long-term. It'll tell you more about how to look at something that's maybe completely unrelated in the future. So I'm looking specifically at US data, and we've got country, region, province, state. I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to select the US to look at. And you'll notice all of the files have the same fields. We've got the province, state, country, region, latitude, longitude, date, and value, or the number affected. So in this case, confirmed, and then in the other, recovered and deaths. What you'll notice the moment I sort on US is we don't just have the state, we have a city or a county in a lot of cases. So with that, this would be really simple if we just had state level, because all we'd have to do is we could sort on US, we could highlight all of this, great, boom, we've got it. We don't have that. So, so when I start looking through this, I also notice, I'm going to go ahead and freeze the top. Let me unsort this and freeze this. There we go. Okay, now if I sort on US. If I sort on US again and we start to look at it, we start to see some things that we would expect to see and some things that we wouldn't expect to see. So we start to see this county level what you'll notice as we start looking at things a little deeper, I should have pulled an example of this, but there were some, I think Washington might be a good one, where you can see initially the reports were coming in and they were being done at a county level. And then, so here we've got Clark County, Washington, where we had cases the 7th, 8th, and 9th of March, and then they disappear. It's not like suddenly that person wasn't positive because these numbers are all cumulative each day. What happens is while things were initially reported on a county level when we weren't seeing that many reports, later they got rolled up into the state level. So those ones that we initially saw there are in Washington's total numbers now. So that's something that we'll need to pay attention to and correct for in the data, which complicates it a lot more than if we just had the states here. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the sheets that I have from recovered and deaths, and I'm going to put them into the same file just to make it a little bit easier. I could reference across multiple files, but to me it's a lot easier when we're dealing with a relatively small amount of data to have it all together. So I'm just going to copy, I just hit up here in the space beside A1 and Control C, and I'm going to put that over into my confirmed, oops, and let's take that again. So we're going to do this with the deaths and the recovered, and I'm going to go here and go ahead and change the sheet name to deaths because I don't want to lose track of which one is which. And okay, now I don't remember which one I grabbed. So let me put this into recovered, and then I'm going to copy that other one because I don't want to take a chance that we're working with the wrong data. So I know that's recovered. Let me open deaths and copy that over again. Okay, I'm just going to close those other sheets. Don't want to save it. Don't want to save it. Okay. Nope. Okay, so now we have our spreadsheet. We've got 3 tabs. We have our confirmed, our deaths, and our recovered. So let's now dig a little deeper into each of these. For each of these, we've got the same thing. So we have the county level on each one. We have the country information. This is already sorted by default alphabetical on country or region location. I'm, in this case, going to look at the US, but we can do this in multiple different ways. So if you wanted a one-time thing, you could just go through, delete everything that is not the US, and then manually correct all of your things that aren't a state. So I could just go in here and I could start typing Indiana and copy it down. That's, if you're just doing it one time, the quickest way to do it. We know that this is going to get updated every day. I'm curious to set up something that's going to work a little bit better long term. So this means I need to get all of these that have a city or a county and get them converted over to a state format. I'm going to turn off that filter just for a moment. I don't need latitude and longitude. You could leave this in if you wanted. If you're using Tableau and you put in a state, it's automatically going to figure out what that lat and longitude is. And once we start correcting our data, it's going to look, it's not going to be right at the state level because it'll keep that county or city level information. We could keep it. It doesn't hurt. I'm just going to delete it because I don't need it for anything. I'm going to take that out of each of my tabs. Delete and delete. Okay, so now we have a little bit cleaner of a setup. So now, again, we could do this manually. I put some formulas together to convert automatically based on the state abbreviation. So one thing that we don't have right now is the state abbreviations. So I just went and I looked up I Googled a list of states and abbreviations, and this site came up. I'll drop this in the chat so that you can grab it if you want. And so I just highlighted the US state and abbreviations and scrolled down till I captured them all. I didn't bother with the Commonwealth or territory or the military states. So now we'll go back to our Excel spreadsheet, add another tab, and drop that information in. And I'm going to call this states. And then I'm going to also take this column B, and I'm going to cut this out, and I'm going to put this before column A. Because we're going to use a VLOOKUP as our formula, and it wants to see the thing it's looking up and then the thing to bring back. So it needs to see the first column that it's looking at is going to be the reference column that it's going to use. So now we're ready to start doing a little bit of looking up. This can take many different forms of complication. I ended up with a pretty big nested statement to use here. So let's work on building that. So I have a few if statements as well as a VLOOKUP and some other things in here. What I'm trying to do is create a new state column here that I'm going to use. And we're going to do this on confirmed, and then we'll be able to copy it over to our other pages. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look up and see if the province or state value is blank, then I want to leave it blank. So I'm going to type equals if, left parentheses, in this case it's A3 equals, and then 2 quotation marks. It's going to look for a blank cell. So if it's that, then 2 quotation marks. Basically, if it's that, leave it as that. And that completes that portion of it. So if it's blank, leave it blank. If it's not blank, now we need to put a second condition in here. So my second condition is I want to look at if the country or region is the US, then I'm going to do some additional looking at it. If it's not, like if we scroll down through here, if we get to, I know Australia, so we've got Australia has some province states. So we don't want to look up on that. We just want to take what's there. We're only looking up on US information. So if it's not blank, then we're going to make another if statement. If this country name equals US, then we're going to do another calculation. So if it is the US, then we want to see, does it have a comma in it? Because if it doesn't, if it's just the state name, we don't need to look anything up. We can just take the state name. If it has a comma in it, then it's a city or it's a county that we need to reference to the state. So if it's the US, then we want to count if this province state has a comma in it. So we're going to say if A3, comma, so that's our range and our criteria, we're going to put quotations. We want to do an asterisk, a comma, an asterisk, and then close our quotations. So we're looking for a comma anywhere in it. If I didn't put these asterisks, it would just look for if there was a comma as the only value in that cell, which we know is unlikely to be the case. So we might have some dirty data that we need to clean up. So the next step that we're going to do, we're going to say count if it has commas. So if it's US, count if A3 has a comma. Then the next thing we're going to do is, no, don't stop. Okay. So then the next thing we need to do, we've counted if it's there. Let me just remember exactly what I did, because I normally build these a little separately. I think we're going to, if that's true, count if that, then I'm going to accept that for a minute. Let me check my reference formula. Again, normally if you're building this up, you're going to do a couple different stages. Okay, so here's where I was. So I actually need to do an if on this count if. So if it's the US, then if our count if has commas in it, then we want to VLOOKUP, and now we need to specify what we're going to look up. So when we look at the cities and states, I'm going to scroll down here to see some of them for a minute. There's two things that we could do. We could do to just take the right two characters in that cell, because those should be the states. I did that at first, and then what I realized is that some of the way some of the data was entered, there were sometimes spaces after the state. So rather than pull just the right, I did a mid calculation and said look up mid, and I want to look up in this text, I want to start at find. So I'm going to find the comma within that text and find a comma within that same cell, and I want to start at character 1 and then close that, and I'm going to add 2 because I want to move to, I don't want to include the comma, I don't want to include the space after the comma, I want to do essentially the first character after that space. So I'm going to say I want to start the second character after the comma, and I want to take 2 characters. So that gives us our lookup, what we're going to look up, and then we need to tell it where to look up. So we're going to go over to our states and highlight columns A and B. And then I'm going to hit comma. I want to take the second column. I want the full state, and then I'm going to say false. So if it finds a comma, then it's going to look up based on the 2-letter abbreviation that we just calculated. If that's not there, but it is the US, then what we're going to do is we're just going to take what's in cell 3, because it should just be the state name then. And let's see, does that close? Let's see. So we're going to get a blank there, of course, because there is nothing there. And let's make sure we're not missing anything. We don't need this confirmed here. It doesn't hurt anything, but since we're staying on that tab. So then A3, and in general, if we don't find something, we just want to take what's in the default. So I think that should do it. Let's try that. I'll leave this up for a moment. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy it down to everything else. So let's take that formula and just double click on that corner. And that should send it down to everywhere. Now I'm going to sort just on the US. And let's see how well this worked. So we have Adams, Indiana. The new state that it lists is Indiana. So that's perfect. And Alabama, where the original was Alabama, we've got that. We've got Florida coming over, California coming over. Perfect. And now if I look at another one, so let me look at Australia. We should, okay, good. We've still got the original province or state names there. So that was a relatively complicated formula. We wouldn't have to do something this complicated. We could break this down into pieces, make a few columns. I usually tend to make more complicated formulas when I can instead of making more columns because I like when I have a cleaner look to my data sets. So this took a little bit of experimenting around to do. And I'd encourage you, take a little bit of time afterwards, think about this, what it looks like, how it makes sense, how you could nest different formulas, because it really does start to clean up what your file looks like. And then this is one column that we can use every time that we want to add data to it. So we've got this new state value here. And we can now copy this. So I'm just going to click on the top of column E, Control C to copy, and go over and drop that into my deaths tab. And again, if I scroll down, we'll see it doing it here. And I'm going to copy and do that same thing into the recover tab, where again, we come down here, we see it's corrected. So that is a lot of the initial cleanup that we need to do. There's a few other things that I did as I was working through this file. So I think maybe the easiest thing now to show you, instead of just telling you the other issues I found, is let's go ahead and put a pivot table on this. So we'll start with the confirmed. We'll go over to insert, pivot table. We'll let it auto select. Actually, I want to take, before I do this, I'm going to actually cut out this second line because I want to just keep my top line. So I'm going to delete that second line. And I'm going to go up to my pivot table, and now it's going to auto pick what I need, and we'll let it drop it in a new worksheet. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and label this as confirmed pivot. And now we need to start putting some things into our pivot table. So I'm going to start by putting a filter on the whole table at country region level. And I'm going to go ahead and select US. You wouldn't have to go ahead and select now, you could wait, but I already know I'm going to filter on that. Then in terms of our values, we want the value field from the file. And it automatically goes to sum. We want to leave it as that, I believe. We'll leave it as that. Let's pull in some other things first. So let's take our new state field and drag it down into the rows. And yep, that's already starting to make a lot of sense. And let's take our date and drag that into rows as well. This immediately gets into something that doesn't look super helpful. So let's adjust it. So it's a little more, so it's closer to that actually original format we had. So I'm going to take my new state down here in my rows, and I'm going to click on the field settings, and I'm going to go to layout and print. And right now it always defaults to outline form. I want to show in tabular form and repeat the item labels. Yes, thanks. I'll move the, let me see, let me switch around the webcam. I'll turn it off for a moment. That'll probably be the easiest. Thanks for saying something. So let me start over. So I haven't done anything yet. I've put countries and regions down into the filters, just clicking and dragging it. I put values by clicking and dragging, and then I dragged new state, and I did not take months, new state and date, and it automatically creates this months field trying to be helpful for an outline. I'm just going to unselect that. So in my rows, I just have new state and date. And I did then go into the field settings, and it looks like it saved it even though I moved out of it. Change it to show item labels in tabular form and repeat item labels. And then we're going to go into the date field settings and do the same thing. Layout and print, show the item labels in tabular form, repeat item labels. All right, so now we're starting to get to something that looks like it's making a little more sense as to what an input file looks like. We have a little bit more cleanup to do. So it has state totals. I don't want the state totals. So if you right click on one of those, you can uncheck subtotal new state, and it should take that out. And then as I scroll down through here, you'll notice a few odd things. So we have Diamond Princess. I believe there's 2 cruise ships that are specified in here. So they don't have a location, but they are tied to the country US. So when these cases started popping up on the cruise ships, they were assigning them to the country of citizenship or permanent residency, but location-wise, they were listing them as the cruise ship. So there's a few in here like this. I left these as is because I didn't really have a good way to convert these over to a specific state. And I wanted them to still show in the total US numbers because it still was people affected that were in the total US counts. Notice we have District of Columbia here. This actually becomes important as we continue going through our data. Here we've got Grand Princess, another cruise ship. We've got Guam, so it's US, but it also has territories. So we've got Guam, Puerto Rico's in here somewhere down further in the P's. I'm going to go down to the bottom, and we had District of Columbia, but we also have some NAs. So we've got something where it tried to look up and it didn't find anything. So we need to deal with that. So I'm going to go back to my confirmed, and I'm going to put a filter on, and I'm going to look for places where the new state, I'm going to clear everything, and then I'm going to click the hashtag NA. So it found an error when it tried to look up Washington, D.C. because it was really looking up D period and wasn't finding anything. So that's something else we need to take into account. But we also now have Washington, D.C. listed 2 different ways. We have Washington, D.C., and we have District of Columbia. I am sure that this could be made even more complicated by having an additional calculation to account for Washington, D.C. In this case, I thought there's only one thing that I'm having to overwrite. It's really easy. So I just manually went and changed Washington, D.C. to District of Columbia. And I did that in here and then copied that to down through all of the ones there. We could probably add this lookup into our states table. We could say D period because we know it's going to be that method, and then we could replace it. But when you come down to this little, again, if I'm going to do this every day, I would turn it somehow into the formula to automate it. But this is an easy enough way to get what we need. So I'm going to change those, and I believe that should clear up. That cleared up all of the ones that we couldn't find. So I'm going to reselect all so I can see everything. I'm going to go back into my pivot now and right click anywhere on the pivot and click refresh. And so now I lost all of those hashtag NAs down there, and all those numbers got combined up into these District of Columbia numbers. So we only have one District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. location now. So this is a good start. Something else that I noticed as I looked at the data is if I look at the format of this date column, it says that it's a date, but if I hit the drop down, you'll notice on this that all of the different items all act like they're staying the same. So Excel's not actually seeing this as a date. It's saying it's a date format, but it's really kind of seeing it as just in general like a text value. So I want to correct for that because if I don't correct for that, what will happen is when it goes into Tableau, it'll reorder things numerically. And so it'll move the 1st of February up above the 22nd of January because it sees it as the number. So we'll want to correct for that. So I find that the easiest way here is this, again, says that it's a date. I'm going to go ahead and change everything in that column to be general in format. And it's going to turn it to a number without the date. And if I refresh my pivot table, it actually shows it as dates here. I don't quite understand why it does this because that's not really logical. When on our original data, it seemed to be a date, but if I switch it to the numeric value, then it registers it as a date in the in our pivot table. So we could repeat the same thing for each tab and then do a nested if lookup. I found it easier to make just one more column that I put in with everything. And I did a state plus date column here. And this is a concatenate. So concat. And I'm going to concatenate column A and hit a comma. And actually, I'm going to, sorry, not A. I want to take E because I want to take that new state. I don't want to take things if they have the county or city level instead. So I'm going to do that and then E2, comma C2. And I'm going to close that. And again, it shows up in that format. So I'm going to double click in the corner and that carries down. Then I'm going to go back to my pivot table and see if I refresh, does it change it? No. So we need to change our data. And nope, not there. I wanted my pivot table options. And our pivot table options, and nope, it's not there either. Change data source. There we go. Pivot table analyze. Change data source. And we just need to take this E and change it to an F. And click OK. And so now that pops up as a column that we can put into our table. So I'm going to take that state and date, and I'm going to drag it down here into my rows after my date. There we go. So again, we need to make some adjustments here. Yes, this recording will be available later that you can come back to it. So I'm going to right click here again, take the subtotal off of the date. So now I've got something that looks pretty good. And I'm going to take this same calculation that I did
on this confirmed, and I'm going to put it on the deaths. So I'm going to highlight the new state and date columns and take them over. And we did the new state. I'm going to just drop both of them in. The new state didn't change though, so you could just take state and date, and I'm going to do that for column E and F here. And actually, what I didn't do is I didn't take out row 2, so we need to do that. And we didn't do that over here, so let's take that out, because otherwise we're just missing the bottom row when we copy this over, and it'll keep our labels more clean. So I'll drop that in again on deaths and recovered. And now we can set up our new pivot tables. We do still need to do that same correction for Washington, D.C. So again, we'll come in here. We see we have those hashtag NA. I'm going to grab just those, and I'm going to put District of Columbia here. And I'm going to copy this down to the rest of them. Great, so that takes care of all of those on the deaths. And I'm going to do the same thing on the recovered. And I know that it's just Washington, D.C. So I'm just going to sort over here this time. And do District of Columbia. And copy, highlight all those, and Control V to paste it in. So now those all look clean. So now we need to do pivots on the deaths and recovered. We could copy this confirmed pivot and just update our data source. I'm just going to create new pivots. I think it's probably similarly quick to do it either way. Again, call this deaths pivot. And I'm going to do the country region on the filter. We want to do province. We want to do new state and date and state date down in our rows. And we want to do value. And then we need to go through and make those other changes. So it automatically always throws this months in, trying to be helpful. We'll uncheck that, go to field settings, show items in tabular form, repeat item labels, and do the same thing on our date. And then do the same thing on our state and date. Let's see, why is that? That doesn't look great because I didn't put the US filter on, that's why. And we've still got these weird text dates. So again, I'm going to go to my deaths tab, highlight column C, make sure it's set to general, and refresh my pivot table. And then I'm going to right click and get rid of the subtotals by state and date. And that looks pretty good. And then we're going to go to recovered. Again, insert a pivot table. Take all of those. I'm going to do our country region. I'm going to go ahead and filter on the US. And I'm going to take the new states. I'm going to take the date. I'm going to take the state and date. Get rid of that months. Pull my values and go in and adjust field settings. Again, one more time, show item labels in tabular form, repeat item labels. Do the same thing on my date. date and date. And this is recovered pivot. In our recovered data, again, we need to change this to general for our numbers. Take off our subtotals, refresh our data. And we probably have, we still have the state subtotal. Right click on that, get rid of the subtotal. So we've got something that is looking pretty good. Now the main thing that we have left to do is we need to put this back all together. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go to my confirmed pivot. I'm just going to copy this. So click in the top left-hand corner, Control C. I'm going to make a new tab that I'm going to call Summary because I don't want to completely overwrite that confirmed. I could, I just think it'll be easier to refresh, and I like to have my raw data sorted out. And I'm going to take, once I create that new one, that new tab, copy this page, go back to my summary, and I'm going to paste and then paste as values. So now we can start cleaning this up a little bit. So the sum of value, this is confirmed cases. I'm going to go ahead and highlight column B, and I'm going to change that to a short date. And now we want recovered cases, and we want deaths. So now, almost finished. To get recovered cases, we're going to VLOOKUP C4, comma, and we're going to look that up. We're looking up recovered first, so we're going to go to recovered pivot. We're going to highlight column C and D, comma, and we want to take the second column and false. So we don't want a close match, we want the exact match. And in the deaths, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to look up in the deaths pivot. So equals VLOOKUP. Look up that state date combo. In our deaths pivot, highlight column C and D, take the second column, and we want to say false. All right, so we've got both of those. Highlight, double click, and this now has applied that same formula. And now we've got something that we can easily update. We can pull that same extract that we did from the Johns Hopkins website, and we can pull it tomorrow. It updates universal time every night at midnight. And then you can see what's happening. You can see here they track the number of downloads. A lot of people are using this. It's been growing every day. Maybe faster than the number of cases we've gotten. Maybe not. It's good to see that people are looking at it. So now we've got this final file. I'm going to go ahead and delete off these first two rows. This is just cleaning some formatting up for my own benefit, because I always like when it looks a little cleaner. And we can quickly see what's going on all in one tab. So that was a pretty long process to walk through everything in real time. Again, there are quicker ways that you could have manually covered this up if you wanted to, but I wanted something that I could easily repeat every time and that I could easily import then into Tableau. And so if I want to update every single day, then I can easily update every single day. And when I go into update, it's going to take me maybe 5 minutes because I've automated everything else. So that's really the summary of the process that I used. And then when you go into Tableau, in your data source, you can, once you load this data source in, you can see I didn't take in the date state combo. There's no harm in doing it because it doesn't change anything in the rest of your Tableau worksheet. But once you get in there, then you can go in. I just save the file with the same name every time, and you can click refresh data source. So when you go in tomorrow and you pull the new data in and it has one more date, you can refresh this, and then you've got the newest data and all of the rest of your dashboards update. And so you can see everything automatically. So a daily update would maybe take 5 minutes. The longest part is probably going to be downloading the spreadsheets and copying and pasting them over into your Excel table form that you've used. So that's the entire process I used. Are there any questions on the dashboard, the Excel process? Go ahead and drop them in the chat. Thanks for everybody that stuck with me through this whole thing. I know it took a little while, but I'm hoping seeing that hands-on process was helpful. There are many, many other ways to clean your data. There are many other tools that you could use to clean your data. In some ways, some cases, depending on what your data is like, you could be cleaning it up directly in Tableau. You wouldn't have to pre-process everything. And you can see we wouldn't have had to do much processing if we had another state that we were looking at. So if I took, so someone mentioned they were watching from Dublin. So if I look up Ireland, there aren't even any province, state, like any other subcategories, cities, anything in there. So this whole process I went through, you'd have to do the last maybe 10 minutes of it along the way. So it'd be pretty straightforward. This dirty data is the reality, though, of what we deal with. And I don't know for those of you that are joining, whether you're studying this, whether you're learning how to get into analytics, but this is very indicative of the reality of working with data in a business setting. You rarely have all of the information you need. There's things that are messed up, even when they shouldn't be. We didn't even look at all of the problems. So I said I had gone ahead and I'd actually dealt with some of them. So let me see if I can remember where it was. I think it was Jackson County, Oregon. So I did this at first and I was getting more errors. And here you've got extra spaces that you can see at the end. That's really what it's like working with data in a business setting. Thankfully, the consequences of it are not nearly as severe as the consequences of what's going on with coronavirus, but they can be big consequences for a business setting. So I'm really glad that you all joined. This is something you could do this cleaning in a language. So you could do it with Python, you could do it with R, you could do it in SAS, and that would help automate it. In some cases, they've got ways that make it a little quicker to clean. I will mention quickly, if you are thinking of learning a programming language and you're not quite sure how you're going to do it, DataQuest and DataCamp are both running pretty great sales right now. I actually use DataCamp myself because I don't know every programming language or every data science programming language. It's just not realistic to learn them all. So I'm actually using it. DataCamp right now is running a sale for $149 for 1 year of access, and they have Python, R, SQL, some intro to Tableau. I think it's a 4-hour intro to Tableau. The lowest I've ever seen it is $250. I paid $250 and thought I was getting a great deal because their normal price is $399 a year. But check that out if that's something you're interested in. Try the free trial because you can absolutely do this cleaning in another tool. You could do the visualization in Power BI. You could replicate it in Python, R, SAS. There's usually not one right tool that you can use. There's so many tools available. And
Excel, I think we like to downplay Excel when it comes to analytics because it's just not that glamorous. When you think of it, who wants to say, oh, yeah, I can write Excel formulas when you could say, oh, I can code in Python? But this is hardly completely simplistic. Like it does have the ability to create really intelligent, really complicated things that can be really useful. And for my purposes, when I first did this, it was I wasn't seeing the visualization that I wanted to see. And I figured, hey, I know how to do it. How hard can it be? So I just started doing it. So my quick and dirty way of doing it turned into, I bet other people would like to see this. And so, if you know a programming language, in the future, if I did something like this again, I'd probably do it in Python because it would be a little cleaner, quicker to do. But the reality is, we can use Excel for so many things. And the concepts, the method that you learn here is so valuable because if you can set up a formula like this, I guarantee you that you can figure out how to program, you can figure out the mechanics of coding it. You'll Google it till you find it. There were things I wanted to do in the Tableau dashboard that I didn't exactly know how to do. I Googled it. You'll use Google all of the time in analytics. So yeah, I just want to encourage you. Thank you so much for joining today. I'm glad to hear it sounds like it was really clear for people. A lot of you learned new things. I'll load this to the channel so you can, if you want to go back and rewatch it, you can. Yeah, try it out. Have fun. Let me know if you have any questions along the way. And leave a comment if you enjoyed the live stream, if this is something you'd like to see me do more often. Like I said, this is the first time I've done it. It was kind of nice to be able to interact and not just talk to a camera, but get the live feedback and be able to adapt. So if that's something you're interested in, leave a comment, and maybe that's something that I can do a little more of in the future with some of these more hands-on things. But otherwise, thank you guys so much for joining. I hope you're all staying safe and staying as remote as you can from others. And if you're working in a field that you can't do that, I really appreciate the effort that you're doing to keep everything running for the rest of us. Thank you so much. Hope everybody has an awesome weekend. Bye.